Innanzitutto i complimenti al vicepresidente della Fondazione M per essersi inventato questa iniziativa di grande valore di contatto e di impegno. La mia domanda è semplice: quanto pesano i conservatori all'interno del governo Trump?
The first question on the conservatives, right, which is a really important question. The one thing I know is we don't understand each other's politics very well because they're really so incredibly different, and because the United States is always kind of locked into a two-party system. And you look like a very nice man, but if you get mad and I don't like you, I'm going to go off and start my own political party. If you do that in the United States, it means I'm going to disappear, right? Because these parties aren't significant. And what that means is our political debates are really locked within the political parties, and they have to resolve themselves. So if you look at American politics really from 1945 through the 1990s, what was distinguishing about our Republican and Democratic parties is they were both very diverse, both geographically and ideologically. So both parties had a lot of liberals, they had conservatives, they had hawks, they had doves, and the political dynamic was you could always be bipartisan because you had factions and other parties that worked together. Even Ronald Reagan was elected with what was called Reagan Democrats. So a large number of Reagan's conservative supporters were actually from the Democratic Party that brought in power. That starts to change in the 1990s. And this is true, like several times in American history, we've had these significant evolutions in political line of the United States. Demographics, geography, politics, whatever, but in the 1990s, our political parties started to become much less politically, ideologically, and geographically diverse. So today, which was not true 30 years ago, today, the modern Republican Party is a conservative party, period. The modern Democratic Party is a liberal party, period. What's different from, say, the right coalition in Italy is all the debates happen within the political party. So, particularly on the conservative side, there is no effort to hold this coalition together by a specific orthodoxy. I mean, there are guardrails, there are certain issues that we all agree on, but there's a lot of diversity of opinion, particularly on foreign policy. Conservatives are all over the place on foreign policy. Some like Russia, some don't like Russia, some like the war, some don't like the war. But the president keeps them together by accepting this diversity. And in the end, the response to that is, as long as the president's delivering good outcomes to the American people, everybody's willing to accept his leadership. And so I think when you say, what is the impact of conservatives in the United States? The impact is they're running the country. The conservative policies are being implemented, and they're providing massive political support to the president to implement his agenda. And that'll probably remain true as long as the president continues to be successful. And then we'll see. But right now, and because unlike other, we don't have left-right coalitions or red-green coalitions or whatever, because in the U.S. system, the party that's running the government gets an enormous amount of political power, and they drive the train. And I think that'll be true until the day the president leaves office. On the nuclear question, look, I think the odds. I think the odds of this war going nuclear are less than zero. If you can't win a conventional war, you don't start a nuclear one. I think the Russian nuclear threats are hollow. They're not. And this is somebody that's worked in nuclear weapons my entire life in the military. A Russian nuclear threat in Ukraine is impractical. First of all, you can't win a war with just tactical nuclear weapons. You have to be able to exploit them with a force on the ground. The Russians can't do that. They don't have an army that's trained to operate in that environment. The reality is that the Russian military saw a nuclear weapon detonate in Ukraine, they'd probably all run away. the blowback against Russia would be so massive, and their military gains would actually be so feeble that it might actually collapse the Russian Empire. I think what people forget is that the United States may be actually providing less monetary support to Ukraine than Biden did. But what Trump has also done is he has practically removed all restraint on the Ukrainians, like attack whatever you want at any depth that you want. And the reason why he did that is, unlike Biden, Trump does not take the nuclear threat of the Russians seriously. And as a result, Ukraine's been successful on the battlefield because they've been able to take the war to the Russians and know that it's just, so I just don't think it's a real shot. The only other thing I'll say about the nuclear stuff, because I get asked this question all the time, is you hear this nonsense about, well, the Europeans, we need our own nuclear umbrella, we can't trust the Americans. All this is utter complete nonsense. There is no nuclear capacity in Europe that can substitute for American strategic deterrence. And ironically, the one thing the United States that is completely bipartisan in the United States is commitment to nuclear deterrence. I mean, Democrat, Republican, we have the world's most dominant nuclear bomber force. We have our investments in nuclear submarines are actually surpassing what I thought was possible. We're committed to having a missile thing. We're going to have the equivalent capacity to the Russians and the Chinese in the foreseeable future. And the difference between the United States and the Russians and the Chinese is we actually have a sophisticated missile defense system, and we can defend ourselves against nuclear attacks. And whereas the Russians and the Chinese have almost none. So I don't think that's an issue. Your point about somebody brought up the issue about European opinion being a real force. Just being blunt here, I think the reality is the United States response to that is we don't care. Because the notion is we have to quit focusing on getting things done to make Europeans like us more or feel better about themselves. The US response is it's much more important that we break some China and get things done than we worry about European sensitivities. So Rubio's statement about the US is not here to preside over the managed decline of Europe, I think that was about as sincere a statement that you were going to get. And I think the US position is there's a difference between popular will and popularity, right? Popularity is how I feel today. I like you, I don't like you, right? Popular will is what am I willing to put up with, right? And I think in the end, European popular will is we want better governance, we want to be more secure, we want to be more free, and we want to be safe. And I think when the US delivers for the transatlantic relationship those outcomes, Europeans will be much more accepting. But if we sit around and try to make everybody feel good, then we're actually gonna lose time and resources. I don't think we're gonna do that. Did that cover all the questions?